Don't know? Okay. So let's go over, we're going to go over the introduction to your trail guide book today, which will, yes, Mr. Craven, please.
Yeah, the homework assignment for yesterday, are we going to have more like that, where we have a little more like creative freedom and it's not just questions?
Yeah, you will. By the way, you've got a lot of just questions in both books, but yes, in this one especially at the beginning of chapters, we have questions about like, hey, read this story. What do you think's going on with this person? Yes, you will see more of that. I'm trying to think of the percentage you're going to see. I hate to tell you, it's only going to be about 10% of the course, though, just to answer your question. But you will see more. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Ms. Hendrickson, please.
Will they usually be like short like that, or are we gonna have to write like essays?
Nah, there's not really much essay in this class. I did that on purpose. We wanted a class that closely mimicked what you need to be a massage therapist, and a damn good one, by the way. We didn't want to cut any corners on that. But we didn't want a class that, like, what if you're a terrible writer? But
right.
You're an amazing people skills and amazing massage skills. I didn't want academically you to be held out because you lacked a skill that you don't need as a massage therapist at all. So I'm sorry for those of you that I like essay stuff, right? I love that kind of stuff, but it's not for everybody. And so, yeah, that's why we don't heavily rely on it. Yeah. I gotcha. Okay. Let's take a look at not even chapter 1. This is the introduction to your trail guide. And what I'm going to be doing here today is laying foundation for us to start talking about anatomy. And that's where we are headed. Very excited to say. That's where we're headed probably for the rest of this week. Okay. So here's the scoop. This book is called Trail Guide to the Body because you guys all have a really tricky thing to do, which is to find bones and muscles inside somebody's body. Now, you would think that would be an easy thing to do, but it's actually really tricky because everybody's body is different. And so we all know where your shoulders and knees and things like that should be, but believe it or not, like in this example here, the scapula is actually extremely hard to find on people because that sucker moves. In fact, let me stop sharing this for just 1 second to make a point here. This is a scapula here. This is actually the right scapula. It would be kind of like this on my body. This scapula can be right next to my spine. It can move all the way out to here. It can move up to here, and it can move way down to there. It's a free-floating joint. In fact, the book will not even label it as a joint. I do, because it moves. But it doesn't even actually touch another bone on your core body. It does your arm. But this guy can honestly move, 6 inches over here. It can go up here, it can go down here, and it can rotate. And so when you try to find it on somebody's body, it's actually very tricky. And then let's take that body and let's put an extra 50 pounds on their back. Now it's like filling through a pillow to try to find that. And so the concept of Trail Guide to the Body is to be able to locate bony landmarks, which are the bumps on my body, and use those bony landmarks to trace down muscles. So if you all touch your shoulder right here and hit a flat bone right there, you are actually hitting what's called the acromion process of your scapula. And you can actually watch this guy move. I mean, he can move. If you put your fingers here, go here, back here, up here, way down here. That's this scapula moving there, up there, down there. And so when people are laying on the table and they just drop their arms off the side of the table, all of a sudden they've moved their scapula 6 inches. And so bony landmarks, which are trail guides to the body, are how we find our way on different bodies as we navigate through them, because you guys are really always trying to massage through all these layers of fascia and skin and adipose tissue, which is a nice word for fat. You're trying to find your way through all that to get to these bones and also the muscles that correspond. So once you know, like, oh, I'm on the acromion process, then you could do other really fancy stuff like be like, oh, well, if I follow it down, it turns into the spine of the scapula, and I know the muscle that's above that, I know the muscle that's below that, and you can start to figure out all sorts of stuff. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to introduce you to a world that you will essentially never see, right? It'd be great if we could peel back somebody's skin and show you, and if we have the opportunity to go to a cadaver lab, we will. COVID kind of threw all that off for us for a while, and that's helpful once you know what you're looking at. But again, that's the challenge we have. So that's why in some ways bones are more important than muscles when we are learning to go through this book. If you learn all the bony landmarks, it'll really help with muscles later, because every single bump on a bone, every single depression is not there by accident. It's there because a muscle attaches to it. And so if you understand how to name all these spots on this bone, then it's very easy to understand the muscles that attach to it and you know where they're going. If you don't learn all the spots in the bone when we do that section, it makes muscles very, very hard to learn because you don't know where they're going, right? But anyway, all these bumps and spots and divots and everything are attachment sites for muscles, ligaments, tendons, another joint to attach or whatever. They're not there by accident. So that's why we learn them. That's the whole point of that. And it's kind of like, if you'll notice on the front of your trail guide to the body, there's a guy climbing the body. It's actually a really neat analogy, because if you were climbing up a cliff, you would reach out for lumps and bumps and stuff like that. Well, on bones, those are called tubercles, protuberances, trochanters, which literally means bumps on bones. And that's what muscles like to hook to too. So this guy climbing up the body is doing the same thing your muscles do. Your muscles like to hook on to these specific bumps on the body. So that's where we're headed. And that's why it's important. So let me start sharing again here. Boop. All right. All right, so there's all sorts of different body types, and so we're learning these different trails and things like that. And that's why what the book is talking about when it talks about a trail guide is it's saying, hey, if you find the acromion process here, for example, and you follow it with your finger, it'll turn into the spine of the scapula. And if you follow that, you're going to get to the medial border of the scapula. Don't worry if you don't know any of this stuff yet. We're going to teach it to you specifically. I'm just trying to give you an example of why you should care. And if I go down on that, I will get to what's called the inferior angle. And then if I follow that up, I'm on the lateral border. And if I follow that up, I'm going to be to the glenohumeral joint. And it allows me to find all this stuff underneath the body when joints move around. And of course, then there's all these muscles associated with this stuff. Okay. This is essentially a fancy picture book you have, Trail Guide to the Body. And I want to tell you how to read it. So, you see some letters over here in boxes. A-O-I-N. A stands for action. And action is, what does the muscle do? Now, I will give you a really, really important trick that works 100% of the time. Muscles can actually only do one thing on their own power. Muscles are highly specialized tissue. They can only do one thing, and that is to contract and come together. They can only pull. Muscles can only pull. Now, that means my bicep here, when it pulls my arm up like this. Now, that doesn't mean my arm can never come out again. I can push it out, gravity can push it out, another muscle can pull it out, but my bicep's done. All my bicep can do is pull. It will stay here forever if my bicep is the only thing that has something to do with it. My bicep cannot push. This arm will stay here until something else pulls on it or gravity or something. Biceps, every muscle in your body can only pull, they can only shorten. Ever. Muscles can only do one thing. I will be saying this to you for 9 months. Muscles can only contract, they can only shorten. And when they do, it creates an action. And we will learn all these words to describe how your body moves. But when my elbow bends this way, it's called a flexion. So this bicep right here, biceps brachii, creates a flexion of the elbow. That's the action it does. So A is the action. A is the action, and we care about actions because they lead to kinesiology. Ms. Hendrickson, please.
So you're saying, like, when you release it, it's not that muscle extending, it's a different muscle.
Yes, actually, in the case that you just did, that's exactly what I'm saying, 100% Ms. Hendrickson. And in the case what you just did, go do that again. It's your tricep that pulled it back out, which is on the opposite side. And literally what happened was your tricep reached underneath here and pulled it back out. It sounds weird, but it grabbed on your elbow and it pulled it back out. And then nothing can happen here with my tricep. That's it, my tricep's done. This arm is never gonna bend again unless my bicep bends it. Or you flip me upside down. I know gravity can move me, but that's not the muscle doing. That's just me flopping around, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you nailed it. Mr. Craven.
Yeah, so is it gonna be like whenever one muscle like either like tenses, another one will have to like relax in relation to that one?
Yeah, they don't have to, but it sure is helpful if they do. If they don't, your body has built-in systems to try to relax the opposing muscles. And we actually use that in PNF stretching, or a version of it. But yes, so in general, opposing muscles relax so the other one can work. What happens when they don't? This. So I'm flexing, right? How am I flexing? I'm telling my bicep to pull while my tricep pulls. And that's why my arm's not moving and you just see my muscle puff up. If my bicep was winning, my arm would be all the way down. But I stopped it. So right now I've got a tug of war between opposing muscles. That's literally how you flex. For those of you who want to become a bodybuilder, that's what you do. You get your opposing muscles and you pose. That's what you're doing. But yes, in general, when we're moving, we don't want an opposing muscle. We want to do our movements in opposites. Yeah. So that's action. And this is just an overview, by the way. We're going to dig deep into this, but this is an overview. So then you have something called O and I there. O stands for origin and I stands for insertion. Yeah? And I'm going to explain what that means. Let's take a little trip to my friend the whiteboard. I want to prepare you all. Not only am I a writer, but I'm an incredibly great artist. So some of these drawings will intimidate you because they're really shockingly good. But try to pay attention to the anatomy that you're going to learn from them. So if I sketch out kind of an exact replica of the human body here. Yeah. Like that. Okay. And this person has scapula here and an arm there. And their arm comes down like this. They've got an elbow and a hand. Can you see that? Yeah. That's one of my better drawings, by the way. All right. So let me explain some stuff. The muscle, the bicep, let's pretend we're doing the bicep. And by the way, this is not an exact representation of the bicep. I'm trying to make a point right now. So later you're going to see that there's a little bit more to this. But let's just say the bicep kind of attaches down in here. And I don't want to confuse you, but it actually attaches way up here and over here. But anyway, let's keep it simple right now. And it comes down here. Can you see that if this thing contracted, it would pull the arm up? If that purple thing got shorter, it would pull the arm up. That's what your bicep does. Okay. Well, we call the spot that usually doesn't move the origin, and we call the spot that moves the insertion. So in general, this is the origin, and the insertion comes closer to the origin. My finger is out here. Now it's here. So, origin and insertion, though, are nothing more than two attachment sites. Okay? So it's attached here to bone, and it's attached here to bone. So an origin is an attachment, and insertion is an attachment. They're getting nitpicky about the attachments, which I'll explain in a second here. Mr. Singletary, please.
So, would the origin be considered the beginning of the muscle? Or the top, or?
No, I'm sorry, I kind of wanted to go with that, but no. It's the part that's less likely to move,
Okay.
right?
Alright.
So, yeah, so it is more likely that if this muscle contracts here, this arm is going to move, then the whole body is going to move.
But the origin is not going to move.
But the origin's not going to move, yes, in general. So, here's what I don't like about, I don't care about origin and insertion. I care about origin and insertions a lot. I don't care about which one is which. And I'll explain that right now. I care about attachments. This origin is an attachment, this insertion is an attachment. And in reality, if you think about it, what always happens is the attachments get closer to one another. In this case, it's usually the insertion, but the fact is attachments always get closer to one another because muscles can only do one thing, which is contract. And so I don't care if this is an origin and this is an insertion, or this is an insertion, this is an origin, we're going to see some type of coming together. Because muscles can only contract, they can only shorten. Mr. Ma?
Yes, sir. My question is, this muscle, whatever, like, it is a biceps.
Biceps brachii, this is not a great drawing of the biceps. I mean, I'm not a great drawer, period, but this is not an accurate drawing of the biceps brachii. I'm just trying to make a point.
Okay, so this muscle works both movement, flexion and extension, right?
No.
Only by this one?
No. Bicep can only flex, tricep can extend.
Oh, so the muscle under this area,
Yeah,
make it move
Yeah.
back.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you're 100% right. You're, in a good way, you're jumping ahead a little bit, but yes, you're 100% right. You're already kind of thinking about how this applies. Yeah. But yes, in a way, I mean, there's more detail, but at my elbow, the bicep can only do one thing, which is flex my elbow. And then I need something else to extend it, which is the tricep in this case. Yeah. Mr. Singletary? Do you have a question, sir? No? No? Okay. Your hand was, okay. Just no. Okay. So,
Sorry.
don't be sorry at all. All right. So, are there scenarios where the origin might move and the insertion might stay still? There really are. So if I grab onto the edge of, hold on, let me just make sure I can see myself here. Yes. If I grab onto the edge of this board, this is the insertion of my bicep, but I just pulled my origin to it using my bicep. In that scenario, the origin insertion, yes, Mr. Overman, that's exactly what I was thinking actually in a pull-up. A pull down, you're pulling, well, both of them, you're pulling yourself to the insertion, right? And I just want to clear up one thing. We don't switch these when that happens. The origin is the area that generally doesn't move. It's generally closer to your core because in general, I stick my arms and legs out and pull them to me. So in general, my origins are closer to my core and my insertions are further out. But even if I'm doing a pull-up and it switches, we don't switch the letters. We would still refer to this always as the origin, always as the insertion. And you will hear Mr. Tapscott often refer to them as attachments because I actually don't care which is which because all I care about is what they do to the thing in between. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say we have in space with a muscle here. If this muscle contracts, if it shortens, what's going to happen? This angle is going to close. Does it matter which one is the insertion and which one is the origin? It doesn't actually. It matters the attachments. I don't care what you call them. I don't care if you call them origins or insertions. I don't care if you call them Betty and Frank. They're attachments. They're attachments. So we will use these terms origin and insertion a lot, but don't get all caught up. If you switch the origin and insertion, but you got the attachments right, it still works. You can still figure out what happens at the elbow. You can call this an origin and you can call this an insertion. Still, when the bicep contracts, those two things have to come together. If you're floating in outer space, those things still come together. Whether I'm coming to the insertion or the insertion's coming to me, my elbow's still bent. That's what I'm trying to say. My elbow bends the same no matter what. My elbow bends the same if I'm pulling something down to me or if I'm coming up to it. My elbow's still bent the same. So when it comes to kinesiology, nothing changed. Does that make sense? If I am flexing this way or coming to it this way, my elbow's still bent either way. So origins and insertions are attachment sites. Now, they are probably, without a doubt, the most important information in this book. I don't care if you flip them, but knowing the origin insertion, knowing the two attachment sites, or the four attachment sites, or whatever, depending on the muscle, tells you everything. I actually don't even look at A for action, because once I know the origin insertion, I can figure out the action. And you will be able to too. You do not need to go through this book and memorize actions. Because once I know there's anything, it's a bicep in this case, but I don't care what it is. Once I know there's a string attached from here to here, and I know that my elbow can bend, and I know that string is shortening, I know what's going to happen. I know that my elbow is going to flex. I don't need to memorize that. That's the beauty of origins and insertions, is they lead to action. And actions, because you know muscles can only do one thing, contract. And therefore, you don't have to memorize actions. And once you understand actions, you start to understand kinesiology, which is how I move. And now you can figure out structural problems with somebody. Now, when a guy comes in like this, and he's like, I can't straighten out my arm, you're like, well, it's probably your bicep. Because I know the bicep is the thing that bends your arm, and you're having a problem straightening it, and I can't straighten it either. Maybe your bicep is tight. I'm obviously oversimplifying, but that's a lot of massage right there. Yeah? Questions? Yes, Mr. Overman, please.
Have you ever heard of a muscle just shutting down?
Yes.
But a while back, every day I'd grab my weights and I'd just do bicep curls, but I wasn't doing anything else for that, during that workout period of time. And my tricep completely stopped working. Like I lost all use of it for like 2 weeks. And I wasn't working my triceps, I was only working my biceps. It was pretty weird.
What do you mean your tricep stopped working?
Well, like,
Do you mean if you put your arm over your head, you literally couldn't lift your arm up like that?
I shouldn't say they stopped working. I mean, they basically stopped working. I could still move my arm, but I couldn't take a 2-pound weight over my head and lift it. I couldn't do a single push-up with that side of my body. It just, I guess now that you mentioned it was still working because I could move it, but
it lost functional power.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have some guesses. I mean, I'm not really qualified, but I've got some guesses about why that happened. One of the things that happens in the gym when we work out is there's definitely some muscle growth that goes on, right? Like your muscles grow and you get stronger. Boom. That's true of all athletics and such. But one of the things we're really, really aware of these days is that one of the big things that changes when you are an athlete of any kind, just doing bicep curls counts, is that your brain gets better and better at its wiring to the muscle and talking to that muscle. And I really wonder if what you did is you trained your brain to listen to your bicep very, very well and talk to your bicep very, very well, and you never gave it information about talking to the tricep. And so it stopped learning to, because you didn't lose all the size back there permanently, And so I suspect what happened is it lost the practice and memory of how to talk to the tricep. And you were kind of training it out of it because you said, every time we're moving this arm, I'm just doing this, I'm just doing this, I'm just doing this. And your brain's smart. After a while, it's like, okay, you know, it's kind of like if I showed up on these calls at 8:05, after a while, you guys would show up on these calls at 8:05. I'd kind of train you that they don't really start at 8. And you kind of trained your brain that like, yeah, we don't really use the tricep. It's cute, it's back there, but we don't use it. I might have to straighten out my arm one day, but I'm not actually going to use it. And I think you really probably untrained the brain connection, and that's why it came back once you started, you know, using it. Did it come back pretty quick once you started using it?
I stopped using it for I stopped curling, and I basically just tried to leave it alone as much as I could for about 2 weeks, and then tried it again, and the strength came back.
Yeah, and it came back quickly, right?
What's that?
It came back quickly?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, relative.
Yeah, I meant relative to what you would expect from your tricep beforehand.
Yeah. I didn't have to rebuild it and go through physical therapy.
That's what I mean. So the fact that you didn't have to do rebuilding makes me think it was a brain-body connection.
Okay.
Yeah. And think about it, a lot of athletics, that's what we're doing. This is why you see really rapid gains sometimes when you start a new activity or whatever, is because you're not even growing muscle during that time. Your brain's just getting better at fire this, do that. And as we learn more about the nervous system, this will make a lot of sense. Anyway, that's what I think. I feel 89% sure about that answer. Almost 90. Okay, everybody. So, origins and insertions or attachments are the name of the game. So, bony landmarks are how we find origins and insertions, and knowing what hooks to those bony landmarks lets me know what action's going to occur, and knowing what action's going to occur lets me know what the body can or can't do and what might be going right or wrong in that situation. So super duper important from that. So let's go back and look at this now with that new wonderful understanding. So right here, we are looking at a sample muscle. This sample muscle is called the Sternocleidomastoid. You will hear a massage therapist refer to it as the SCM, which I expect when you graduate, you will refer to it the same way. That's how I refer to it when I talk to other massage therapists. But while you're in the class, don't abbreviate, because you'll forget what SCM stands for. It stands for Sternocleidomastoid. Now, not all muscles are named like this, but I like the way this one's named because it's named by its attachment sites. It attaches to the manubrium, it says, but the manubrium is part of your sternum. Sternum, clavicle, sternocleidal, and there's a bump on your skull back here on the temporal bone, an extremely important bump. An extremely important bump. Back here, kind of behind your ear. I've actually got it in the skull here. This skull in orange is the temporal bone. That's all one bone. This is the bump. That's your mastoid process. So this muscle, yeah, you should be able to feel yours, Mr. Jones. You should be able to feel it. It's pretty obvious. There's a bump there. Yeah. And it should feel kind of sensitive, maybe good, sensitive, I don't know. Kind of, there's a lot of, important stuff there. Kind of behind your ear. Anyway, sternocleidomastoid. So this muscle hooks up here and attaches to two places down here, right? And theoretically, the origin is here and the insertion is here because it's my head that moves, not my chest, right? But again, I don't care. If you flip those on a test, I wouldn't care as long as you knew them, right? So what I can do right now is I can take my fingers right now and I can put them on my sternum and my mastoid process. You should be able to reach those two, kind of like this. If my fingers contracted, like I was pretending to be a muscle, what would happen? I would create, yes, I would look down. That's exactly right. I would look down, which is called a flexion of the neck. So you will see in this thing, it says bilaterally, this muscle's action under A, bilaterally, is to flex the neck. What they mean by bilaterally is bi means two. Think of a bicycle, two cycles, two wheels. Bi means two, and bilaterally means both sides. So if this muscle, if both sides act, it will flex your head. If one side acts, which is unilaterally, it can actually cause a rotation of my neck or a lateral flexion of my neck. But we can even see that it'll actually create a little bit of a rotation of my neck. So that's the difference between unilateral and bilateral. How do we feel about that so far? Any questions, Chad? Good. Yes, Miss Carrillo, please.
Hi, it was rotation for unilateral and what?
Well, rotation to the opposite side for unilateral.
Opposite side.
Yeah, it's all in your book, by the way. And yeah, sorry. This is just, sorry, I'm so sorry. This is just an example muscle. We're not even going to do this muscle for a while, but it's just the one that they have in your introduction. And so I was using an example to figure out this kind of bilateral, unilateral action stuff.
Yeah, I the bilateral and the unilateral, I found that a little interesting.
Yeah.
As I just wanted to make a quick note
Yeah.
to
But
for my
literally,
flashcards and stuff.
yeah, so literally if I pull on the sternocleidomastoid at these points at the same time, that's unilateral and it helps to flex my neck. If I pull on just one side, I'm sorry, I just told you wrong. If I pull on both sides, that's bilateral and they pull down my head. If I pull on just one side, it causes either a lateral flexion or a rotation of my head. Don't worry about these terms yet. We're going to actually spend an entire class, a couple of classes learning just those terms. But we're just trying to kind of see how to read the book. Did that help, Ms. Graham? Kind of, maybe? Okay. Mr. Jones.
Yes, I was wondering, if the sternocleidomastoid looks down, is it your traps that would cause you to look up?
Yeah, actually your traps can help you to look up. That's a really good, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can help you to look up because your head's heavy. So getting it back up is actually a big deal, but your traps can help with what's called an extension of your neck. Yeah.
Yes, because I'm noticing essentially there's a pattern that, like, there's a front and a back essentially to everything, which is like the push and pull working at the same time.
Well, it's like the pull and pull working from different sides. Yeah.
Yes.
But what you said is, I know where you're going with it, and you're 100% right, and it's actually a little thing that I say in class a lot, which is essentially muscles in front pull me to the front, right? If muscles can only pull, and I want to get you to come to me, I've got to be in front of you. If I want to get you to go backwards, I've got to get behind you. So muscles behind me tend to pull me back. Muscles in front of me tend to pull me forward. Not 100% of the time, but darn close.
Yes.
Because they can only pull. So if I pull my head back here, the stuff that's going to get it back, whether it's the trapezius or not, is going to be something behind me because there's nothing in front of me that can push. It's got to pull me back with something. Yes.
So with me specifically in my shoulders, I did a bunch of back workouts, and it starts to pull your shoulders back.
Yes, that's right.
Forward.
It starts to retract them. Yeah.
It'll go towards your chest essentially.
Yeah.
That's why you have the variances in scapulas and such.
Well, yes, you also have the variance of scapulas because they move just regularly when anybody moves their arm, but you also have variances because of how people are built. You're absolutely right. And many people that work out a lot, especially guys, you actually don't see what you did, sir. You focused on your back. A lot of guys focus on what? Bench press, bench press, bench press all the time. And you will see them, they look like they have a collapsed chest. And it's because they've done all their work up front, all these muscles are contracted up front, and they kind of, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but they kind of have this look. Whereas you, sir, if you did all your back work, you probably had this look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you. Miss Osuna, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I did. I was gonna ask a question. I know it's not relevant right now, but like
It's okay.
on the test that we have to do at the end of the course, is it gonna be all separated, or is it gonna be all together, like the origin, insertion, and the action?
we have a test at the end of the year? Do you mean is the test going to say what is the origin of this muscle and then what is the insertion of this muscle?
Yeah, they're gonna be all separate with different questions or all together?
Altogether, I think, if I understand what you're saying, it's going to actually ask you, the test at the end of the entire class asks you to identify a muscle and what action it might do. And you're visually identifying the muscle, which I will show you guys pictures to give you an idea of this. And you're trying to figure out the action of that muscle. So you would not need to know which was an origin and which was an insertion. You just need to know where that muscle, what the attachments are. That's why I meant it doesn't matter if you flip them, because the test, you're right, does not ask you which one is an insertion. And then it's wrong if you give it an origin. No, it's not like that. It really is just saying like, hey, what's that muscle there? And you're like, oh, that's the bicep. What does it do? Well, I remember the bicep attaches here and does this, so it must do a flexion of the elbow. Yeah. It's actually very simple in that way, because that's what you need to know as a massage therapist. Yeah. So yes, no, it will not get nitpicky in that manner at all. And you will be well prepared for it because you're going to be, darn it. Because I will make sure that you are well prepared for it. Because I really care about it. I think it really helps with your career. Miss Abelos.
Hi, are we going to need to know the spinal nerve root to the muscles, or are we not going that far into it?
We're not going that far into it. So what she's asking everybody is, let me share this again just so we can kind of, because it ties into what I'm about to talk about. You're absolutely right. So what Ms. Abelos is talking about is nervation. So A was action here. What does the muscle do? O is one of its attachment sites. I is another one of its attachment sites. If you know both those, you can figure out the action. And N is called nervation. And that means, where does the nerve come from my spine to tell this muscle what to do? So everything. So N is nervation. By the way, the short answer to your question, Ms. Abelos, is no. You're not going to learn nervation. And let me explain why. Go back to the whiteboard here to make a really important point. That's your head. That is where your brain is. That is the top of your nerve stem. Okay. You cannot feel anything that brain is not connected to. You cannot feel anything that our brain is not connected to. If you stub your toe, all it does is set off a sensor in your toe that's an electrical signal. It goes deep or dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. It actually sets off usually about 7 to 70 sensors in your toe, and some say whether it's hot, abrupt, sharp, all sorts of stuff. But it flips a switch. That's it. And you won't feel that unless that thing goes up a nerve, up your leg, and into your spine, and then up to your head. If that doesn't occur, you will never feel that. I have a friend who's paralyzed from T5 down. One of her biggest things that she has to be careful of is that she doesn't bump her leg up against something and cut it, because she'll bleed to death before she knows what happened. Even if it takes hours, because she doesn't feel her legs. She'll just be like, oh, I feel kind of tired, because that's how you feel when you're bleeding to death. I feel a little sleepy. I think I'll just nod off in my wheelchair, and she's dead. So I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm trying to explain how important your nervous system is. The other thing is, if you want to wiggle that toe, a signal has to come down from your brain down to that toe. Or otherwise, you won't wiggle it. It won't happen. So your body's very efficient at how it does this. The brain's up here. It's got a big, thick spinal cord, which is nothing more than a big cord of living wire. But it's wire, it carries electricity, it really does carry signals. And then off of this, all of the nerves that you need for your body come off this. So everything you feel comes back to your spine, runs up your spine to your brain. Everything that you feel, everything that you move comes either from your spine or to your spine and shoots up to your brain. Okay? So the reason we don't have to learn nervation, though, is a really cool thing. If you were a neurosurgeon, you'd need to know exact nervation. If any of you have had really bad nerve problems, sometimes they'll take you and they'll put little needles in to try to figure out exactly what nerve has been damaged or whatever. But for us, we're never going to massage like one little vertebrae or whatever. We're going to be massaging general areas. And so we don't have to be exact, but we do have to have a good idea. And the reason we might want to know nervation is because if I come to you and say my hand hurts, it's possible my hand hurts. It's also possible that there's a problem with the nerve right at the spine where my hand nerve connects. And the person can't tell the difference. I don't care how smart they are. They can't tell the difference. They're just relying on signals. If I call you on your cell phone right now and say fire, you don't know if I mean fire here or fire where you're at. You just know I'm telling you fire. So if you have a pinched nerve in your neck, it can cause pain in your hand. And your brain assumes it's actually pain in your hand. It doesn't know, because that's the nerve that's being pinched. To give you another example, if you turn on your water faucet this morning and no water came out, you don't know if that's a problem at the sink that you're at the connection of the house, at the city water plant. Any of those would stop your water from going. You just know you don't have water. Kind of same thing with a nerve thing. If there's a pinching in the neck, it can give you pain in your hand and you don't know the difference. So when we're massage therapists and somebody comes to us with pain anywhere, we work that area, but we always assume there's a chance that there could be a pinching near the spine or anywhere along that way. Please do not assume that everybody that comes to you with pain in their arm has a pinched nerve in their neck. But they might. And because it doesn't hurt me at all to do it, I'm going to massage the arm and the neck. That's why nervation is important. Here's why you don't need to memorize it. Because your body's very efficient and very smart. And guess what? The nerves in your neck feed your arm. Always. I don't care if it's C3 or C4. The fact is the nerves from my neck feed my arm. If there is an arm pain, it's got to get back up to my neck to go up to my brain. The nerves from my legs enter in at my sacrum and my low back. If there's problems in my legs, it could be problems in my legs, but it could also be a problem in my low back or my sacrum. The nerves in my thoracic region and my back here feed my chest and stomach. If there's a problem in those areas, it could be a pinched nerve in that area. And for that reason, we don't have to learn all the nervations. Because if it's pain in the arm, it could be a pain in the neck. If it's pain in the legs, it could be a pain in the low back or sacrum. And we'll get a little bit more into detail on that, but that's why we don't need to know. Because you guys will graduate from here and you'll be like, this guy came to me, he's got some arm aches and pain, so I massaged the arm, but of course I worked the neck just in case. By the way, you oftentimes won't know if you're right either way. They'll just get better and you'll be like, well, it was one of those two things. We're not like a surgeon. We actually don't go in and go, it's this one thing and I'm going to fix it, which is good, by the way, because it's rarely one thing. Nerves can be pinched in 3 places. I can come to you with tingling in my hand, and it can be this nerve that's pinched in my elbow, pinched in my chest, and pinched in my neck. It's called thoracic outlet syndrome. And I don't want to work one of those spots. I want to work all those spots. But why wouldn't I work all those spots all the time? Right? You don't need to always know. You just need to be working smart and have a good idea. So anyway, that's why we're not going to learn nervation, which is the N in this book. What do I really care about in this book? O's and I's, O's and I's, O's and I's. I don't care if you switch them, because they're all attachments to me, but O's and I's, that's what it's all about. Yeah? Cool. Okay. So, we'll take a break here in a second, but let's take another look at this page really quick so that we have a good overview. So, almost every page in your book looks like this. And you're not going to memorize it all. For one thing, you want to really visualize it. The test at the end of the year, for example, will show you a picture of this skull here, basically, right? And it'll say, what muscle is this? And it'll be multiple choice, and it'll say sternocleidomastoid, biceps brachii, triceps brachii, rectus abdominis. And you're going to be like, of course it's the sternocleidomastoid. And then it'll say, what are the actions of this? Is it to flex the neck, extend the neck? It'll have opposites because I want to make sure that you figure out it can flex the neck. But so the most important stuff from these pages is this picture of how it looks and the O and the I, the origin insertion. I mean, I would read all the other stuff. They always have really interesting stuff in the book that's helpful, but that's it. You want to know what it looks like so you can visualize it, and you want to know where the O's and I's are so you can figure out what it does. Fun little side note. The sternocleidomastoid is also nicknamed the prayer muscle because it helps me bow down my head in prayer. And so it's an old school term for it, but people still call it the prayer muscle sometimes because it helps me to pray. So I have 2 questions for you that I'd love to hear answers about after break. But I'll give you the questions before break so you have something to think about while you're sitting on the toilet, peeing and drinking your coffee, or whatever you do. My 2 questions are, if muscles can only pull, then how can I do a push-up? If muscles can only pull, how can I do a push-up? Because I'm definitely pushing. So if muscles can only pull, how can I push? That's question number 1. Wait till after the break to raise your hand. Question number 2 is, with this sternocleidomastoid, it says when it's working unilaterally, just one side, it can rotate me or laterally flex me. How does it know which one to do? Like, how does that happen? How can it do this or this? Like, how does that happen? How can it do 2 different things? How does my brain know which one to do? How does it make 2 different movements occur from the same muscle that can only pull? Why, when it pulls one time, does my head turn, the other time my head bends? Inquiring minds want to know. All right, 15-minute break, everybody. I'll see you at 9:46. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Singletary?
Any updates on our massage tables?
Yes, they were supposed to show up this Thursday. Thank you for asking. Massage tables are supposed to show up this Thursday at both places.
Cool.
Well, Ms. Everson, and I did not think that was going to work because I'm like, I've actually never had that happen on my end. Wow. There it goes again.
So too soon.
Is your sound on? Yeah, mute your sound.
Then I just hear you and not
Right.
clear. Okay.
There you go. Okay. So it is that.
It's kind of scary.
So is your sound muted?
Yeah. Yeah, I've muted my sound.
Are you sure?
Wait. Just kidding.
No, I can hear it.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. We found the problem. Okay. Thank you, Miss Everson. Mr. Jones, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just wanted to answer your first question before.
My first question, I believe, is why can I do a push-up when my muscles can only pull? Why can I push when my muscles can pull?
Yes, so you actually can't. You are correct. Nothing is pushing except maybe your bones against the ground, like your hands would be pushing, but that's just the pressure of them. It would be your pectoral muscles are just contracting, or your back muscles, depending on which position you're at. But it's always something pulling. They're just all working together at the same time, several muscles.
So, and how does the pulling turn into a push?
Your bones, your body, essentially the structure of your body is what is pushing, but the muscles are only pulling.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, excellent. By the way, you're right. You're right. 100% right. Ms. Carrillo, did you want to add to that?
I was basically gonna say, I like the back muscles as well, but I can try to answer the second question if that's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can wait.
Yeah, wait 1 second, because he's right, but I don't know. I just feel like a little bit more explanation on that. Oh, you're gonna say something?
No, I need more time to think about it. I'm sorry.
No worries. Miss Rader.
I'm thinking because there's like opposite muscles to each other, like you were saying before. So if the bicep, pulls up this way, then it's your tricep that, pulls back the other way to bring it down. So my thought is that each muscle has like an opposite muscle.
Sure. Your thought is correct. Your thought is correct. Yeah. So, by the way, you're all correct. I mean, absolutely. Our bones in our body act as levers. Our bones, our bodies act as levers, and what's neat about levers is I can pull on a lever and it'll push, right? I can pull on something and it'll do the opposite action. So here I'm pulling this down, but what's happening? The lever is going up. And that's how you do a push-up, right? Is that it's levers that turn pulls into pushes. If this is a muscle and all I can do is pull, that's fine. But even though I'm pulling this down, it's actually pushing this up. And so yes, and everybody kind of said that. I'm just looking for levers though too. Like it's levers in your body. All your bones are levers essentially. And that's how you're able to pull on something but get an opposite action, which actually ends up being a push. Yeah. So, and then by the way, something for you guys to think about, are the levers of your body designed for power or for speed? Ms. Carrillo, what is your answer to the second question? How can I pull a muscle and sometimes it turns me and sometimes it flexes me?
Okay, so I was thinking of the rotation. Is that you're having muscles on this side pulling you into the rotation. So if I turn my head this way, oh gosh, oh gosh, I'm getting scared, nervous. I mean, but you want to look this way. So these muscles would be pulling this way because they're contracting. So the ligaments are contracting and pulling. So your head is turning this way. But when you want to rotate it this way, I feel like one, gravity helps relaxing these muscles so they don't contract, and I want to say it's like back here is like there's like a help with the pulling as well, but it's yeah, that's what I could come up with.
I think you're onto something here. Mr. Ma, you raised your hand.
What I'm thinking is the muscles can work together and they can also work separately or individually to make a separate or different movement.
That's exactly right, sir. That's exactly right. Mr. Overman, did you want to add to that or anything? Or explain it differently or comment?
I was just thinking it looks like a really wide muscle, so I was thinking maybe it depends on what part of the muscle down here you're pulling from. Like if you're pulling from, the I don't know the directional terms yet. So
sure.
The front muscle might turn it, the back muscle might pull it, something like that.
Yeah.
Of the attachment.
Yeah, it's beautiful. By the way, you're both right, and I'll elaborate on that in just a second. But Ms. Clayton.
So when I look at the picture, it looks like there's the muscle goes into a V and it's attached in two different places. One is the clavicle and the other one is the sternum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what Mr. Overman was saying, like your brain could just fire one of those as opposed to the other one, and that would cause different movements, which is true. And what Mr. Moss said is true too. Muscles don't work in isolation. So I was asking this question By the way, didn't somebody else have their hand raised? I lost them for a second. Okay. Anyway, I was asking this question because I didn't want the book to confuse you. The book tells you the action of a muscle, and it's true this muscle can do this or this and this, depending on what's going on there. But muscles don't work in isolation. So there are two answers to this question of why can I get two different movements out of this one muscle. And one is, it's absolutely true. Your brain can fire different sections of the muscle. So if the muscle attaches to two different places, it can choose just to fire the fibers that go to that one place. It can choose just to contract those. In fact, when you contract your muscles, your brain are always telling certain fibers to fire, or all the fibers to fire, or just one of the fibers to fire. And so you subconsciously have a tremendous amount of control over that kind of stuff. And that is why you can get different actions out of a muscle that's attached to two different places. But the other part of this answer that's super important too is what Mr. Ma pointed out is like, yes, that muscle can do that, but what happens is other muscles kick in to cause it to do one action over another. So, this muscle really runs diagonal. What it wants to do every time is to bend my head down and twist me and bend my head to the side. If it was really just doing what it wanted to do, it would kind of bend my head down and diagonally go to the front here. But what happens is my brain is very smart. And if I want to turn my head, it uses this muscle, but it tightens up a muscle in back to keep my head from falling down. So now I don't do this, now I do this. So the sternocleidomastoid did not do it by itself. Other muscles stopped unwanted movements. They literally grabbed the back of my head so it wouldn't go down, and then when this muscle pulled, all it could do is turn. So yes, muscles don't work in isolation. Sometimes, actually almost all the time, other muscles kick in to help a certain action or to prevent an action you don't want. So my brain unconsciously knows that this muscle wants to pull my head diagonally down and rotate it. But if it has another muscle holding my head back and it tries to do that, my head will not go down and it'll just rotate. If it has another muscle stopping me from rotating and this pulls, it'll just pull me to the side. It's not working by itself. So super duper important, because I don't want you to think these actions are really these muscles acting alone. This kind of tells you what the muscle would do if it's acting alone, but it's never acting alone. It almost always has other muscles helping to stabilize it, helping to move it, helping to stop unwanted actions, helping to assist with that action. So in most movements you do, you're using multiple muscles. In fact, just to talk to you right now, I'm using 12 muscles. I'm not even talking about my facial expressions. I'm talking about talking. And I'm not talking about my vocal cords. I'm just saying just to do these articulate movements with my mouth and what's involved with my tongue takes 12 muscles right there. Cool. So actions tell you what they do acting alone. It'd be kind of like if I got to know one of you really well and I knew how you acted, but then all of a sudden I drop you into a lab. The actions of that lab are a combination of everybody acting, and we can figure that out by putting it all together, all the pieces together, but muscles rarely act alone. But when we study an action, we're talking about that muscle acting alone. I hope that answers that. And muscles can push by pulling, because when they pull on a lever, it actually pushes the lever up, or wherever you're going. It actually changes the direction of the action. Boom. Cool. Yeah. And something to think about just in the back of your mind is whether your body's levers are designed for speed or power. But that we'll get to another day. Just something to think about. Whether your body was designed for speed or power. Because of the levers. What type of levers do you have in your body? Okay, so that is origins, insertions, actions, nervations, all that kind of stuff that you will see on almost every page of this book. And what's really important is the name, what it looks like, and its origin insertion. Cool. Moving right along. Palpating. Palpation is a word you will hear a lot. You will hear it your entire massage career. We talk about palpating. It means to feel. Your book has all sorts of little hints about how you palpate. By the way, you're normally palpating to find bones, and then use those bones to find muscles. That's actually the way to do it. Find the bone, then find the bone on purpose, and then use it to find the muscle. And I find that palpating, your book might say kind of a light touch kind of stuff. I actually find palpating really works well when you are using a fairly firm touch. And I don't poke around to find stuff. It's a flat hand and I wiggle around through there and I keep it on the body to find stuff because I want to bump into it. So I'll see people kind of do this where they're like, I'm trying to find this thing. Well, you're trying to find something in the dark, so keep your hand on there until you run into the bump you're looking for. But palpating is just trying to find things underneath the skin. It is feeling underneath the body. And you'll hear massage therapists talk about it all the time. Hey, come palpate this thing. Is that palpatable? There are some muscles in your body that are not palpatable. They can't be felt. They're too deep in your body. The ones we are going to be learning, all of them are palpatable to some extent. About the 100 muscles we're going to learn are all palpatable to some extent. They can be felt. One of the best things for finding muscles is to add movement. So if I'm having a hard time finding a particular muscle here, strumming is when I bring my hand across a fiber that runs this way and it kind of play it like a guitar string. People don't enjoy this, by the way. Don't do it in your regular massage, but if I'm trying to find something. But also rotating the person's arm or whatever you're working on when you're trying to find something is very helpful because you create movement in there and stuff wiggles underneath your finger and it's easier to find it. So adding movement to your palpation really, really helps to find what you're looking for. Especially when we get better at anatomy, because I know when I move the body in certain ways, certain things should happen and I should be able to feel certain things. And so oftentimes I am moving somebody's body to help me figure out where I'm at. I'm also doing it, by the way, because it's an excellent thing to add to your massage. Movement put into massage tends to make massage better. So, movement really helps in palpating in general. Move structures, but keep your hands still. Yeah. So that what they mean by that is my hand that's palpating is still, but we're moving the structure. We talked about this last week, but passive movements mean you're not passive, you're working the whole time. You're going to be working the whole time. Passive movements mean your client is not helping. So passive movements when I'm wiggling the client's arm. Active movements are when I tell the client, move your arm. Because I sometimes will ask for an active movement because I want them to flex. I'm trying to find a muscle or something. That'd be a very common reason to do that. So passive, I'm kind of wiggling the bones around and stuff like that. Active, I'm trying to get them to engage muscles so that I can feel them, right? If you want to know if you're on the bicep, ask somebody to do a bicep curl with some weight there and you'll feel the bicep contract. You'll be like, oh, that's it. It kind of helps you find it. Active and passive there. Oh, by the way, they talk about journaling a palpation, palpatory journal, like writing down what you feel and stuff like that. This is going to shock you, but I'm not promoting that you do that. But I am promoting, I will never check it. I will never know. But you will be very glad you did it. I've had many students do this. Is get a journal and write down one thing you learned every day in this class. Just one thing. At the end, you'll have a journal with about 120 things in it that every massage therapist should know and that will serve you very well for life. So it can be more than one thing, but it's very helpful if you kind of take away, because you hope at the end of 9 months together that you take away 120 facts. I mean, I hope that are with you for life. So that's a thought, just a thought. Okay, these are overviews. We're going to do an entire section on the integumentary system, which is your hair, skin, and nails. But the skin, very simply put, is really a 3-layered system. One of those layers has 5 layers within it. 5 layers within it, but But it's really 3 basic layers. We're not estheticians. We're not going to go into gory detail. The skin, by the way, is the largest organ of your body. It is an organ. It's the largest organ of your body, and you guys can touch all of it. So it's super important. And it tells us a lot about the general health of somebody. It tells us about how much pressure they can take and all sorts of stuff because of how elastic their skin is and things like that. But the 3 layers are the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. Epi actually really means first or on top. It really means on top. So on top layer, on top of the dermis, epidermis, dermis, and then hypodermis. Hypo means underneath. You guys have ever heard of a hypodermic needle? It's a needle that goes underneath your skin. Hypodermic needle. So hypo means below. So you've got epidermis, dermis, hypodermis. Hypodermis also goes by 2 other names. Subcutaneous, which means underneath the skin as well, and superficial fascia. This is an important concept to get. And again, we will go over an entire integumentary system, but I want you to understand this basic concept before we get there. Let us go back to the whiteboard. Let's suppose we have a muscle. It's kind of a muscle. Remember, what did I say each of those muscle fibers were wrapped in? What is muscle's made of a whole bunch of fibers. What is each fiber wrapped in? Anybody?
Fascia.
Fascia. And then groups of those fibers are wrapped in what?
Fascia.
Fascia. And then groups of those groups of fibers are wrapped in?
Fascia.
Yeah. And then the entire muscle is wrapped in?
Fascia.
Yeah, and then groups of muscles are wrapped in?
Fascia.
Fascia.
Whoa.
And then on top of that, skin. So, this muscle we're looking at right here has fascia around each little strand, fascia around these strands, and fascia around the whole muscle, and then there's probably groups of muscle that have fascia around that. Up here, I've got my skin. I've got my epidermis, I've got my dermis, and I've got my hypodermis. Well, hypo means below, right? Hypodermis means below the skin, below the dermis. Superficial means above. So my hypodermis is also my first line of fascia. It's the lowest layer of skin, but it's the uppermost layer of fascia because below this is fascia around the muscle, fascia around the bundles of muscle, fascia around the individual fibers. Does that make sense? Okay, it's a weird way to put it, but superficial, think of Superman, it really does mean above. The highest level of fascia is the lowest level of skin, and that's why you can call them the same thing. This is your hypodermis, but this is also your superficial fascia. It's the lowest level of the dermis, it's the highest level of the fascia, because underneath this fascia is all sorts of other fascia. So that's why they call it that way. And I'm making a big deal out of it because I want you to structurally kind of understand that. Because fascia is kind of skin. And underneath your skin on top here is fascia. In fact, you can feel the first layer. It's kind of the thing that your skin slides over, and you can feel it. It's the reason I can take my finger and move my skin around. It's fascia sliding over other fascia. It's fascinating. Yeah, very cool. So, there's epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, subcutaneous, or superficial fascia. Again, just overview. We will do this in detail at some other point, but gives you kind of an idea of what's going on. Oh, good. I'm glad you love pun. I hope you like dad jokes, Ms. Everson, because that's all I've got. They're funny for the first month, and in the last 8 months, you're like, would this guy just stop? By the way, your epidermis, your top layer of skin, most of it's dead. And that's a good thing. It's the reason I can scratch myself right now with my nail. I mean, I don't really have a nail, but if I did, I could scratch myself with my nail and I don't bleed because the top layer of skin is actually dead. What happens is your skin grows from the bottom up and gets to the top, and then it sloughs off. Most of the dust in your house is your skin. You slough off quite a lot of it. Anyway, and it's good that it's dead because at the top it kind of protects you and it waterproofs you. And your fresh skin grows from the bottom up. That's just how it works. Your dermis is your thick layer in the middle, and that's where everything's living. There's blood flow there, there's nerves there, there's all sorts of stuff there that we will learn about when we get the integumentary system. And then underneath the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer kind of gives it the first layer of fascia before it goes on to everything else. Yeah. Cool. Just overview. Okay. Muscles! Yeah! Muscles can only do one thing. What is that, Miss Hendrickson? What's the one thing muscles can do?
Pull.
Thank you. They can pull, they can contract, they can shorten. I don't mean that they can't be lengthened again, but they can't lengthen themselves. Once they pull, they are helpless. This bicep will stay this way for the rest of its life if something else doesn't come along and help it out. It'll stay that way. I don't mean it'll stay, it just can't do anything else but pull. It gives up here, it can loosen up, but it just, nothing happens. Okay, they can only pull. All right, we have names for muscles depending on what they're doing. Okay, but I want to be very clear these names can change. Sometimes you are a father, sometimes you are a mother, sometimes you're a student, sometimes you're a citizen, depending on what activity you're doing. Okay? So, when we say a muscle is a prime mover, it's the main thing creating that movement. In this case, my biceps brachii is the prime mover. It is the thing moving this. But I'm going to kick in my triceps right now, okay? Now my triceps are the prime mover. My biceps are not the prime mover in this exercise. So biceps are not always prime movers. Triceps are not always prime movers. When you guys are at school with me, you're students, but you're not always students, right? It depends on your activity. So the muscle doing the main movement is called the prime mover. It's not always the prime mover, but when it's doing the main action, it's the prime mover. When I'm doing bicep curls, my biceps are the prime mover. When I'm doing French presses, tricep extensions, my biceps not the prime mover anymore, my triceps are. Okay? Another word for prime mover is agonist. I remember this because it's the muscle in agony. When I'm doing bicep curls, my biceps hurt, they're in agony. Your prime movers are your agonists. Ms. Hendrickson, please.
Oh, that just made me think of like literary term, protagonist or antagonist. Like,
yeah, that's exactly.
They're moving the plot along, whether it's good or bad.
It's the same term. You're right. You're exactly right. So an agonist is moving the plot along. It is causing agony. It's the muscle that's working. It's the muscle that's shaking while you're trying to do your bicep curls. And it's not always the agonist, right? Only when it's the prime mover. So prime mover and agonist are the same thing. The thing that causes you agony is the muscle that's working. It's the prime mover moving the thing. That's an agonist or a prime mover. The antagonist, kind of like from literature too, the antagonist is the thing that can stop the movement or do the opposite of the movement. So, when I'm doing a bicep curl, the agonist or the prime mover is the bicep. The antagonist is the tricep. If my tricep tenses up right now, it will stop this movement. It will antagonize it. It will try to stop it from what it wants to do. That's the antagonist. This is extremely important in massage therapy because quite often we are trying to find a problem with an antagonist. Quite often it's not the person's prime mover. It's not that they can't, like the bicep isn't working and they can't do curls. They're having a hard time doing curls, and sometimes that's not really the biceps problem. It's that the tricep is locked up and they can't do curls easily. And so by releasing the tricep, all of a sudden the bicep can do its job. So, in this movement, my biceps brachii is the antagonist prime mover, my triceps brachii is the antagonist. But now in this movement, my triceps brachii is the prime mover, the agonist, and now my biceps are the antagonist. They can stop the movement, right? Because of the pull on both sides. So these are terms based on what the muscles are doing in the moment. Prime mover is an agonist. It's creating the movement. Antagonist is the thing that can stop the movement. And strangely enough, we might be more concerned as massage therapists with antagonists. And a tricep can be an antagonist or an agonist, depending on what it's doing. Every muscle in your body can be an antagonist or an agonist, depending on what it's doing. Actually, I don't know if that's true, but 99% of them, that's true. Mr. Ma, please.
So if the antagonist is very tight and locked, so what's the best way to lose that?
Massage it. I don't, it's a very, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm being a smart ass. It's a very complex question you're asking, but the simple answer is you would massage it, right? We would try to loosen it up. You could argue about the best way to do that. Possibly just brisk massage alone would bring enough blood flow to kind of flush it out and open it up. That might work. Stretching might work. Deep tissue might work if we think that the fascia is kind of stuck together. We can get in there and actually break up the fascia and kind of open it up that way. So it would just depend on the situation, but massage is essentially the answer to all that. If you think the antagonist is causing the problem and it's stuck kind of in a shortened position or something like that, yes. We would do various forms of stretching, whether that's true stretching where we stretch it, or stretching where I actually get into the tissue and I stretch it out. Some type of massagey, stretchy technique, yeah. And all of that hoping to increase blood flow too, because when blood gets into muscles, they tend to loosen up. So I hope that answers your question. Or at least started us on that path. Okay, that's prime movers and agonists working against antagonists, or antagonists working against prime movers and agonists. I would like you to look at this picture a little bit here. Around the bone is called periosteum. That is fascia around the bone. The tendon is fascia that weaves into the periosteum. All of these little things are fascia. Endomysium is fascia around a muscle fiber. Paramysium is fascia around a whole group of muscle fibers. Epimysium is fascia around whole groups of those groups. It just keeps on going, fascia around fascia around fascia. Fascia, yes. Just making sure I didn't see a raised hand. Okay. So I'm not expecting you to memorize all that right now. I just want you to realize there's fascia around everything and that it all weaves in together. Yes, Ms. Clayton? I saw your hand up for a second.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said picture, but you didn't show a screen. I didn't know if you
Oh! That's why I saw somebody say chapter 11, but I forgot that I wasn't sharing. Let's look at this again. It'll make so much more sense. Here we go. Let me restate that. This is a bone. All muscles, that's not true. All structural muscles that we're studying attach to bone. The bone is actually wrapped in, it's made of fascia, by the way, but it's actually wrapped in fascia too. And that fascia happens to be called periosteum. You don't have to memorize that right now. We're going to do this all again. The muscle itself, if you look at a single muscle fiber up here, it's wrapped in fascia called endomysium, which means the last layer of muscular fascia. Mysium is muscular fascia. Paramysium is around bundles of that. Epimysium is around all those bundles. And then all that fascia weaves down and becomes the tendon and inserts into the periosteum. Very simply put, and it is very simply put, I'll explain it in greater detail later, tendons attach muscle to bone. Tendons are fascia that attach muscle to bone. And the beauty is the tendon is a seamless part of the muscle, and it weaves in like a spider's web to the periosteum here that is on the bone. You don't really want your muscle just screwed into one spot on the bone because it's very easy for it pop out. You want something that's like Spider-Man's web that weaves into the bone, so when it pulls on it, it pulls very evenly and effectively. Your body's very, very, very good about distributing stress. And it's extremely important because, believe it or not, you generate tremendous amounts of stress inside your body. I'm not talking about being stressed out, I'm talking about force. Tremendous amounts of stress. So some of these tendons experience 2,000 pounds of pull on them. Not when you're lifting 2,000 pounds either. They experience tremendous amounts of stress on them. So they have to be woven in the bone properly so the bone doesn't break, the tendon doesn't tear off, all that kind of stuff. Anyway. We will be studying, by the way, there are 3 types of muscle. There's smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. And smooth muscle is around like all your arteries and veins and a lot of your organs, things like that. It's inside your body. Cardiac is your heart, that's it. And skeletal muscle is any muscle that attaches to your bones. And we will be studying almost exclusively skeletal muscle because we care about muscle that attaches to your bones because your bones are levers, and when the muscle pulls, that's how you create movement. Muscles contracting plus a bone lever equals movement. And that's skeletal muscle 100% of the time. So we are going to study about 100, 101 skeletal muscles because we care about movement, movement, movement. Whereas there are some muscles in my facial expressions that aren't actually attached to bone. They just help to wrinkle up my cheeks and to move stuff around for facial expression. Those aren't movement muscles. They're not skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscle is attached to bone. Again, I will say it again, this is the one class that you will take in your lifetime where we encourage you to touch yourself during class. Yes, that's my favorite joke, and I admit I'll overdo it, but we do. When I'm talking about the bicep, there's nothing better than you to sit there and play with your bicep, right? Move your arm around, it changes quite a bit. It is really cool. You can actually even feel the 2, bi means 2, there are 2 sections to the bicep. You can feel them. I can get between the 2 if I play with my bicep. They run lengthwise here, and you can get between the two muscles in there. I'm in them right now, between the 2 parts of the bicep. You can trace it all the way up to where it goes, where it heads to. You can do all that. And it locks it into your brain, especially if it hurts a little bit while you're doing it, because you're like, oh, yeah, while I'm talking to you. You're like, I'll never forget that. I used to have an anatomy teacher who I loved. But when you forgot something, I'd be like, hey, where's the pectoralis minor? And he'd come over and be like, right there, right there. And I'd be like, ah! And you'd never forget again, though. He wasn't trying to be mean. He wanted me to feel the pectoralis minor, and boy, did I feel it. And I never forgot. So, touch yourself when we are talking about muscles. Touch the muscles we're talking about. There are different types of muscles. This is actually, I hesitate saying stuff like this, but this is not super important. I mean, the names aren't super important here. The fact is you have muscle fibers, and they run certain directions, and all those fibers can do is one thing, which Miss Hendrickson told us, they can contract. So the direction of the fibers matters because it can tell you kind of what the muscle can do. So if we look at this sphincter muscle right here, by the way, there's a sphincter muscle here, there's one around my eyes, there's one around your butt, that's what everybody thinks about, but there's also ones around your eyes and your mouth, and it's a circle. So when it contracts, it cinches up. That's why I can do this. Okay? Whereas if you see this fusiform muscle here, all the fibers roughly go in the same direction. Well, that's my bicep. And what does my bicep do? It pulls in one direction. If we look at the deltoid, which Ms. Abelos was kind enough to tell us about today, the deltoid is called a multipennate, don't worry about that, but the fact is it goes in all these different directions, right? And that's why my deltoid here can pull my arm forward, pull it out to my side, pull it back, because the fibers run in different directions. That's what's important. The names of the different fibers going different directions, not really that important at this point, but it gives you an idea of what the muscle can do. They can still only pull, but it gives you an idea of how they're going to pull, and can they pull in different directions. And as you guys pointed out before, your brain is smart enough. It can pull just some of these fibers if it wants to. It does not have to fire them all. It's very smart. Okay. Tendons. Tendons attach muscle to bone. Yes, they do, they do, they do. Mr. Ma, what do tendons do?
Tendons is for stretching.
But they attach what to what? Tendons.
Bone and muscle.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. They attach bone to muscle. Ligaments, everybody, attach bone to bone. They look just like tendons. They are just like tendons. But ligaments attach bone to bone. Tendons attach muscle to bone. And actually, you have more ligaments in your body than you do tendons. Ligaments are the reason that somebody can grab on your arm and kind of pull you, and it doesn't pull your arm out of your socket even if you're not flexing, because the ligaments hold you together. Miss Bauer, do you need me? No? Okay. That's a teacher looking at me. So, that's Massage 101. Make sure you know tendons attach muscle to bone, ligaments attach bone to bone. Ligaments keep your bones together. Don't get me wrong, muscles help, but ligaments keep... Look at this foot here. That's not even all the ligaments of the foot, not even close. And they keep your foot hooked together. So they sew all the... They're flexible, but they keep all the bones together. And thank God they do. And also be glad we're not learning all the ligaments, because if we learned 100 muscles, we'd have to learn 1,000 ligaments. You've got a lot. I already talked about fascia ad nauseum, but this picture, there's a lot of pictures like this in your book. They're actually kind of cool once you kind of figure it out. My arm is made out of 2 bones. If we sawed it down right through here, after I screamed for a while, and we looked at it head on, we'd see this picture. And this picture is trying to show you how much fascia is there, where everything runs, how it all works. And you can see the skin here. You can see the hypodermis, or the superficial fascia. You can see there's now a layer below that called the deep fascia. You can see the fascia around the bone, the periosteum here. You can see all these layers of fascia, and this is cross sections of muscle. Everything's wrapped in fascia. And you can see arteries, veins, they don't show nerves here, but they'd be right here. Arteries, veins, and nerves running through these muscles. And yes, they can get kind of pinched and contracted inside the muscle. So let's talk about different types of fascia, because basically I told you guys everything's fascia, which is a slight exaggeration, but not much. Everything's fascia, but it comes in different sizes and shapes, right? So, bear with me one second. If I can get to it quick enough. I don't know if I can. Oh, yes. All right. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Okay. You guys see this? This is saran wrap. Anybody here like chicken? Cool. Have you made chicken where you get a chicken breast and there's that thin layer of something over the chicken breast and you peel it off sometimes? And it looks, hopefully, it looks a lot like this. It looks like saran wrap. And it's really hard, not hard, it's really strong, right? And it looks like a real thin kind of thing. That's fascia, by the way. That's superficial fascia. And that chicken breast, by the way, is a pectoralis major of a chicken. So, fascia. If I fold this up, and we get this kind of thick, kind of sheet-like kind of thing, aponeuroses. This is aponeuroses. It's sheet-like fascia. Strong too. I mean, I know this is saran wrap, but it actually makes the point. Fascia is the same way. Once you get it like this, it's already super strong. And the fascia in your body is thicker and stronger than this. But this would be aponeuroses, sheet-like fascia. Yeah? You find, yes, Mr. Singletary, please.
How do you pronounce that again? 'Cause I've seen that on a couple examples. Aponeurosis?
Aponeurosis.
Aponeurosis. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Aponeurosis. And by the way, the sheet-like fascia, very common to find, well, on everybody. You've got it on your belly, you've got it on your back, and believe it or not, you've got it on your head. You've got like a fascia shower cap. It's why you guys can take your head and move it like this. That's the fascia. So this is aponeuroses, and thank you for touching your heads. This is aponeuroses, sheet-like fascia. Now we've got kind of a ribbon. Retinaculum. Still fascia. Where do you find this stuff? A lot of times you find it wrapped around all the time, not a lot of times, everybody's got this, wrapped around your wrists and your ankles to help protect them. Where you guys see gymnasts wrapping up in the Olympics, all they're doing is taking elastic, bandages and doing exactly what their body already has underneath them. It's just they're going to take so much impact that they're giving extra fake fascia around their fascia. But you guys all have this around your wrists and ankles. You've got this stuff called retinaculum that's ribbon-like fascia to help give extra support. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's flexible too, which is kind of cool. Get this into a rope and attach it to two bones, and this is a ligament. If I take this and connect a bone to a muscle, it's a tendon. But it's all fascia, right? And the stuff that you take off the chicken, I think you'll admit is stronger probably than this saran wrap is. And you can imagine what it does once you get it like this. I don't think I can break this once I wrap it up like this. I mean, I don't think I can break it. And your fascia is much stronger than this. So it's kind of really cool what happens when it takes different shapes. So sheet-like fascia is aponeuroses. Ribbon-like fascia is retinaculum. Ligaments are fascia that are rope-like, that attach bone to bone. And tendons are fascia that are rope-like, that attach muscle to bone. And all of it connects in. Like the aponeuroses on your head has all these muscles attached to it. It's not just sitting there. It's not a shower cap there. All this stuff helps tie stuff together in your body because it's all fascia. Yeah? Yeah. Cool. Yes, Miss Clayton.
What are the building blocks of fascia? What's it made of?
Oh, excellent question. We will get to this again later because this is just overview. But fascia is made up of three things. And it's really fascinating to massage therapists because knowing these three things kind of lets you know why bodies respond the way they do. Now I got to remember what those three things are. Elastin. Hold on. Elastin. Ground substance. Why am I forgetting the other one? Hold on. Ground substance, elastin, and hold on. And collagen. Oh my God. I honestly know what I'm talking about. Okay. Elastin, collagen, and ground substance. And I'll explain why they're in there. So, ground substance is this kind of jello-like substance. It's got a lot of water in it. It's got a lot of nutrients in it. And it's very jello-like. And in the sense also that it's like, when jello's really warm, it's really soft. When jello's really cold, it's pretty hard. And your fascia's the same way. So it's got this, what they call ground substance, but it's the stuff that all the other stuff is in, and it's why fascia tends to be more responsive when it's really warm. So there's somebody here, I forgot who, I'm sorry, but was talking about hot yoga. I'm not very flexible, but when I took Bikram yoga that one time, I could touch things I could never touch before in my life. Because the room was 105 degrees and my fascia was very warm. And when your fascia is very warm, it's flexible. This is one of the reasons we warm up a body in massage. Is because the ground substance gets warm and their fascia gets looser. So, in this ground substance, there are fibers. They're like hair-like fibers. They're microscopic. And one is called elastin, and it really is like little rubber bands inside this jello. And the elastin does really cool stuff. The elastin allows me to do this and have it go back to where it started, which is nice, because otherwise when I did stuff like this, my nose would be over here, and I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to flex stuff and have it come back. So elastin really does give you the ability to snap back. It is elastic. And it's shock absorbing, right? Elastin is what allows me to kind of bounce around and distribute all that stuff. So it's these rubber band-like fibers, microscopic, but rubber band-like fibers in this ground substance jello. So we've got this really weird jello right now that has rubber bands in it. But fascia also has to be strong and not tear. And so also in here is collagen. And collagen are tiny little fibers that pound for pound are stronger than steel. So they are tiny little steel fibers. So now you've got a jello that you've made, and that jello has rubber bands in it and steel wires. So depending on how warm it is, it changes in flexibility. It has the ability to stretch because of the rubber bands. It has the ability to not tear because of the steel fibers. And you've got this beautiful substance because your body has several big problems to deal with. And one of them is it has to be able to be strong but flexible. And if you think about it, we're very good in this world at building stuff that's either strong or flexible. We're not good at building stuff that's both. Right? So when we build a building, we'd like it to be strong and we don't really want it to be flexible. We want it to be solid. If we build something that's too flexible, it doesn't tend to stand up. So we always have, in fact, in earthquake construction, one of the things they do that's very tricky to do is build a strong building that will also have some flex to it so the earthquake doesn't destroy it. But the point is your body has to do that all the time. It has to be strong and flexible. And so fascia is built up of three things: ground substance, which is like gelatin, and it's got fibers that are collagen fibers and elastin fibers in it, steel and rubber fibers in it, essentially, that allow it to be strong but also elastic. Now, different fascia in your body has different amounts of elastin and collagen, depending on whether it needs to be more flexible or more strong. The fibers run different directions. So depending on what the fascia has to do, the fibers might run different directions in that jello. We'll get to that later, but that's why you can get different attributes out of fascia. But those three things essentially make it in different amounts depending on what's going on. Yeah. And by the way, when you see a scar, usually that's fascia with lots of extra collagen in it to make it very strong. Because your body's like, you already tore here once, we're not going to have that happen again. Mr. Ma.
So what you said, sir, the fascia, ligament, and tendon, they are made of the same mechanical materials.
Yes.
But they have different thickness, shape, and different strength for different function.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. Well said. Yeah. Yeah. Essentially, it's all fascia, and they have different shapes and whatever, which due to their different functions, absolutely. And in reality, their actual makeup might be different amounts of collagen or elastin or ground substance or whatever, or the way the fibers run. But yes, it's all the same stuff in different shapes and sizes depending on what it's doing. Yes. Yes. Ms. Clayton, yes, please.
So is your body then basically bones, fascia, muscles, and then veins and arteries?
Yeah. Your body is made up of only, I hate statements like this because they're confusing. Because it's like saying that the skin only has 3 layers. Well, yes, it does, but one of the layers has 5 layers. So should we say that it has 7 layers? It gets confusing. But your body is only made up of 4 main types of tissue. And it's muscular tissue, nervous tissue, epithelial tissue, and connective tissue. 4 types of tissues, and the most numerous one is connective tissue. So you're really close to making an accurate statement. What is a little bit, by the way, you noticed I didn't mention bone in that type of tissue, because bone actually has a fascial base to it, believe it or not. So, but yes, your body is basically made up of a whole bunch of connective tissue with some Some of it filled in with calcium and such, so it becomes bones, and muscular tissue and nervous tissue and epithelial tissue, which covers the lining of things in your body. Yeah. Miss Avalos?
Yes, I've studied fascia in the past, and they hinted on, well, they actually directed us that fascia actually has nerve endings, and a majority of our pain doesn't just come from, you know, that it's holding everything together and that type of stress, but it also has nerve damage, and when that stress occurs, it tightens up, so that's why we have to release it. So it's one of the main focuses was releasing stagnation of the nerves inside of fascia. Is that kind of accurate?
I think it's 100% accurate. Couldn't agree more. So you have nerve endings running throughout all your fascia, and that's a lot of how you sense stuff, and the nerve endings and nerves can get stuck in the fascia along the way, and that can cause pain. Yes, absolutely. A lot of what we're doing in massage, a lot of the reason people feel better after a massage sometimes is literally just because you've kind of unglued their nerves that were kind of getting stuck. So every time I move my arm, I'd be like, ow. Well, all you were hurting was a wire that was running through some fascia. Now you've rubbed it and that wire moves now and it's fine. So absolutely, I 100% agree. Ms. Dimitruk?
We're cooking up a pork shoulder tonight, and now we're doing it in the slow cooker to break up all the connective tissue for 8 hours. So
You stole my line. That's exactly what.
sense.
Yeah. So what happens is, you're absolutely right. So any good cook knows that what makes a really expensive cut of meat, like a filet mignon, the reason filet mignon is so tender is it doesn't have a lot of fascia in it. It's from an area of the animal's body that is not under a lot of stress, and so the muscle doesn't have a lot of fascia to give it strength because it doesn't need it, and so you get this very tender piece of steak. Not a very strong piece of steak, but that's why if you get a really good filet mignon and it's cooked properly, you can cut it with a fork. When you buy a pork shoulder or a rump roast, these are cheap cuts of meat, and I do not mean you are being cheap, ma'am. I just mean they are cheap cuts of meat. They are loaded with lots of fascia. They can be quite delicious, by the way, but they're loaded with lots of fascia. And fascia, when you heat it up really quick, it gets really hard. And then you've got this chewy pork shoulder thing, and everybody's like, oh, thanks for inviting me to dinner. But when you cook it low and slow, and you're doing the 8 hours, when I used to eat meat, I used to do the same thing you did. I had a thermometer, I'd stick it in there until it got to, I forget what it was, 212 or something I was shooting for. But anyway, I'd stick it in the oven. No, not 212, 170 or something. I was going really low. I'd stick it in the oven and wait for that thermometer to go off to where I was trying to get it at 205. That's what I think I was trying to get it to. But anyway, and yeah, it would take 8 to 12 hours to get there. But what comes out is you get this pork shoulder come out, and it tastes like an expensive slice of meat. Fascia does have flavor in it too, but all the fascia is broken down. You're 100% right. Yeah. And that's why we cook low and slow with stuff. If it doesn't have a lot of fascia in it, you don't cook low and slow. Yeah. Good. Cooking lesson, anatomy lesson. It's all right there, people. Okay. Let's see what else. So, we talked about retinaculum. Arteries and veins. Hey, really quickly, blood is life, and arteries cover, and we're going to go over all this again, because we're going to do the cardiovascular system. But arteries and veins are literally plumbing in your body that carries blood to and from your heart. And it has to carry it to every single muscle and bone in your body, or it dies. And arteries and veins generally travel together, and they generally travel with a nerve with them too. So if you think about it, it's just like here in Phoenix when they're doing road work and they cut open the road and the sewer pipes are down there. Any other pipes they have are in that same trench. You wouldn't dig 2 trenches. You put if there's electrical wire, Cox cable is down there, they run it all through the same trench. Your body's the same way. So that's why we talked about the endangerment sites. This is where one of those trenches comes close to the surface, and there's an artery and a vein here and a nerve bundle here. That's why we're a little bit more careful, because there's an artery, vein, and nerve close to the surface. So we tend to be a little bit more careful. And those tend to be in the folds of my body where there's no muscle there. And that's why they're a little bit more delicate in those areas. But nerves, muscles and nerves, arteries, and veins like to run together through the same trenches. We'll call them all sorts of stuff, but nerve bundles. So I just want to let you know that. So when we find out where they go, they tend to run together, which makes sense. We don't need to know what bursa is yet, but they are little lubricating sacs that help tendons slide over your joints. We will study these separately so that you don't get friction build up in your body and have problems. By the way, anytime you hear the word itis after something, it means inflammation of. Tendinitis, inflammation of a tendon. Ligamentitis, inflammation of a ligament. Bursitis, inflammation of a bursae sac. Tapscottitis, inflammation from listening to Tapscott. Works every time. Yeah. Okay. Nerves. We already talked about this, but all nerves have to get back to the brain or go away from the brain, right? So when you compress a nerve, you can get referred pain. If you pinch a nerve in your neck, you can feel the pain down your arm. That's referred pain. The problem is actually not here. You think the problem is there because your brain doesn't know where it's pinched. Your brain's just trusting what's coming across the wire, right? But again, if I call you on the phone and say your house is on fire, your house might really be on fire or I might be crazy. So you just know that you're getting the message. Well, your brain is just like, all I know is I'm getting a dee on the wire that goes to the pinky. So I'm assuming my pinky hurts. And it might. But sometimes your pinky doesn't hurt. It's the wire is hurt that goes to the pinky. So that's how that all works. Lymph nodes we will learn about later, but lymph nodes are little filters that are all over your body. They tend to be in the folds of your body too, in the endangerment sites. There's more found in the endangerment sites than anywhere else. They are filters for your body. We'll talk about them later. I'm just talking about them because they happen to be here in your little slideshow. Okay, let's stop right there for at least a moment. That is an introduction to the trail guide for the body. Just an overview. Really the most important part of this discussion was muscles can only do one thing. They can only pull, and tendons attach muscle to bone, ligaments attach bone to bone. Origins as insertions are really both attachments. If you know the attachments and know muscles can only contract, you know that you can figure out the action from that. That's really the big stuff, and it's all fascia. Questions, thoughts, comments, anything? Yes, Ms. Hendrickson, please.
I just had a little story comment, something I found really fascinating that I learned about the brain and pain, because the brain can create pain with visual stimuli even if it's not actually anything wrong with the tissue. And there was an example of a scientist trick people into believing that a rubber arm was their real arm with this mirror, and they drape their real arm and then put a rubber arm, and by they would do something on both arms at first, and then they would take away the real arm and then they would just use the rubber arm. People actually felt things in their brain, they felt it in the fake arm,
Yeah,
and then they would smash it with a hammer, and they'd be
Yes.
like, oh my god, and then they'd be like, look, your arm's fine.
They take a fake arm out here and their real arm, and they stroke them both at the same time. And after a while, they can remove this arm, and the person kind of thinks they're feeling this. They're not really feeling it, but what they're doing is their brain's smart enough to be like, well, I do feel that when you do that normally, and it makes connections. You're absolutely right. And you're right, then they do this cruel thing where they hit it with a hammer. Freaks the person out.
Pretty cool.
But it's a very important thing you bring up, because none of you feels pain. All you guys feel is dee 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 dee, and your brain goes, those are pain receptors going off in the wire that normally goes to my little finger. Therefore, I must feel pain in my little finger. I'm going to tell this, I don't know that your brain really thinks like this, but I'm going to tell this person I'm in pain so that they pay attention to their little finger. And then your brain says, that hurts. It doesn't actually hurt. We don't even know if there's a problem with your finger. Usually there is. Usually this works pretty darn well. That's why we're all here. But it is not actually feeling pain. It is getting electrical signals that it's learned to interpret that way. Many of you do things that other people would consider painful that you enjoy. A lot of people, when they first start working out, go, oh my gosh, this hurts. The muscle burn hurts. People that love to work out tell you it's pleasurable. They're like, yeah, the burn, right? Because they know that they're getting a good workout. And so they've changed the way they feel about it. They've literally told their body it means something different.
Yeah.
It really was pain to them, yeah.
And retrain your brain to like, that doesn't hurt, or
Yes.
like, that's not so bad, and then it actually makes it less bad.
It does.
You don't think about it as like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, brains have an incredible capacity for that. And that's actually a big part of massage too, is taking that into account. Taking into account the fact that brains have a memory. It's not always correct. That's kind of where PTSD comes from. It's a very well-intentioned system in your brain to be like, the last time that happened, it was bad news. So every time I see that stimulus, I'm going to assume it's bad news, but it's not. And so that is true of all sorts of things. So all sorts of emotional situations, all sorts of lifestyle situations, and everything. Our brains learn a certain habit, so to speak. Any other questions, comments? I'm going to release the homework. You have 2 homework assignments. One is a 36-question test on this introduction to Chapter 6. And the next one is an introductory assignment to, I'm sorry, I said to Chapter 6, but number 1 says 6 test trail guide introduction. It's 36-question test to what we just talked about. The next one is assignment number 7, and it's for the first chapter of the trail guide, because we're going to start doing that tomorrow. The next couple days we're going to do trail guide only, and tomorrow we're going to talk about navigating the body. Like, how do I discuss where stuff is on the body? And actually, honestly, some of these first chapters in trail guide are some of the most important stuff in the entire course. Because if you don't learn directions, and then I talk to you about other stuff, and you're still trying to remember the directions, it'd be like me trying to describe how to get to Flagstaff and you don't know north, south, east, west, stuff like that. It's super helpful if you know those directions. And when I say, hey, turn south, and you're like, was south that way or that way? That happens with this section too. So some of the most mundane stuff in this course in many ways is the most important. So directional terms that we're going to do for the next couple of days, actions of the body that we're going to do, those are super important, and bones become super important because all the muscles attached to them. Mr. Bose?
Yes, hi. So I just wanted to tell you that I lost connection for a couple minutes, so my hotspot disconnected, so I got kicked out. But I'm here.
Okay. I didn't.
You were like looking for me.
Yeah, if I'm looking for you, yeah, I would let you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I wasn't looking for you, so I didn't know until you fessed up.
Okay. I just want to tell you.
Thank you for your honesty. All right. Anyway, by the way, if you guys do go MIA and I'm calling on you and I can't get you over a period of time, I do have to mark you absent at some point, right? But I don't worry about it if it's just for a couple of minutes. I assume there's been a network connection, you had to go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff. And in this case, I didn't even catch it. So, yeah. Anyway, I've released both homework assignments. I admit 7 minutes is not a long time to work on them, but you have 7 more minutes of class that I need you to stay on with me. And I'm here to answer questions if you want, but you can also sit there and look at your homework or whatever else you want to do until we're done with class. And thank you.